Something weird went wrong, so I'm going to re-record chapter 23 of Carlota for you. We had no rain that winter. Whenever you dug, the earth was dry. A few showers came in April, but by June the grass and fillory had shriveled up and died. It was a bad year for us and many of our friends. In June, on a day when white clouds were wandering around on the horizon, my grandmother and I sat in the parlor and talked about the drought. A year ago, Doña Dolores said, we sat in this very sala and watched the rain pouring from the sky and coming down through the roof, I reminded her. We caught it in jugs. We both tried to laugh. Rosario, who crouched in front of Doña Dolores, tried to laugh also. She told him to shut his mouth, that this business of the drought was not funny. Doña Dolores would have liked to blame me for the drought, but somehow she just couldn't make a connection between the weather and the way I ran things. After my father's death, the problems of the ranch fell upon my shoulders. I had learned about the workshops and I could ride with the vaqueros, but still I was not ready to run Dos Hermanos. I had looked to my father to make decisions since I was old enough to remember. Now the decisions were suddenly mine. I could not count upon Doña Dolores, upon anyone, only upon myself. The worst trouble I had at this time came from the mayordomo, Juan Diaz. The first order I gave made him angry. Can you take some of the vaqueros, I said to him, and dig a new well? The one in the patio is giving us scarce 10 gallons a day. Diaz was part Indian, solid as a tree stump, a young man of many talents. I wanted to keep him, so I spoke softly and asked if he could undertake the task. He was not used to receiving orders or even suggestions from a woman, a 16-year-old at that. A new well, he replied, will yield no more water than the old. Are you certain? I asked. Yes. Why are you certain? This question puzzled him, but he said, there are things that you know and things that you do not know. True, I said, and one of the things I know is that we need more water. Perhaps you would prefer to build a flume from the stream and bring it to the house that way. The stream was half a league away. Trees would have to be felled, sawn to length, fastened together with pitch and rawhide. It would be a difficult task and a long one. You can take your choice, I said, but we must have water. The mayordomo turned away, grumbling under his breath, but that afternoon he began a new well outside the walls of a nearby meadow. In a nearby meadow. 2 days later, he sulkily announced that we had a new well. It yielded more water than the old one. Juan Diaz never got used to taking orders from me, but he did the work I gave him, as did the others, the blacksmiths, the leather workers, the cooks, servants, and the vaqueros, the herdsmen who cared for the cattle and horses. It was the vaqueros who were my friends, and on whom I leaned and depended. It was these men who saw us through the worst drought in the memory of anyone then living. The drought started early in the year, as I have said, and by June the hills were bare. Cattle began to die. Water holes dried up. The stream shrank, and we had to dig holes in the stream bed to tap small quantities of the water that ran beneath it. In July, we began the slaughter, because everyone, all the ranchers from San Diego in the south to Santa Barbara in the north, were forced to kill their cattle. Hide sold for only a few centavos, and there was no market for tallow at any price. We stored almost 1,000 botas against the time when it would bring a few centavos at least. The hides we could not cure or store, so we buried them in pits. We struggled on through the month of August. We were sad at the sight of our cattle and horses dying. September was the time our first rains usually came, but this year clouds blew up in the afternoon and then disappeared at dusk. We ourselves began to run low on food, not on beef, because our cool house was stacked with meat, but on tea and chocolate, flour, sugar, salt, and on beans, which the servants and the vaqueros ate, liking them better than anything else. Around the middle of September, I took 4 of the vaqueros and extra pack horses and made the long journey to San Diego. Before the drought, it was easy to get credit, but I found that the Pueblo store now belonged to a gringo. Worried by the drought, I was afraid to buy all the goods we needed, not knowing when I could pay for them. We packed the horses with only light loads. When the time came for me to pay for the supplies, I asked the storekeeper, whose name was Caleb Thomas, to charge them to Dos Hermanos. Mr. Thomas was a thin little man with a friendly smile, gold spectacles, and a pale nose. You are buying lightly, he said. Looking at your past account, I would say that you have bought about half of what you usually buy. I don't know when we can pay even for what I have, I said. The drought will end one of these days, Mr. Thomas said. Until then, your credit is good. Let me give you a jug of Jamaica molasses. It just came in today. He led me over to a counter and showed me a length of blue cloth, just in from Boston, the newest material, and these shoes. Fashionable New York ladies are wearing them. Mr. Thomas hopped from one counter to another, showing me everything that had arrived that day by ship. My heart sank as I signed the bill. It was for more money than we usually spent on supplies for the ranch, even in good years. But I did have a big packet of Cuban tobacco for Doña Dolores, and a beautiful china shawl for myself, as well as a black bombazine dress that had real lace around the collar. As I rode away from the store and Mr. Thomas waved me goodbye, I felt very lightheaded. She overspent and got into debt. Uh-oh.